Hello. Let me just do some things. Yeah. Hi. So what I'm gonna do? Second one in the day. I just thought I kind of had been working on this a few days ago. It's all based on the BMC near miss and accident reporting stuff, and so I went through and I just looked at the um, trad climbing accidents, and they run from 1988. There's a few each year up until um, about 2017. You know, like less than a handful, really, up to about 2017 when I think they actually started this online thing. So there's a lot more data, and effectively, what we are going to do is just look at that data from all I've done is done a very quick, dirty, qualitative kind of assessment of it. Um, I try to praise down every single incident into one line of kind of what happened, why it might have happened. Um, and within doing that, you kind of start to see patterns occurring, and it would help. I think if you were going to do a statistical analysis of this, probably starting with something like that would help. Um, and then I've basically just made a very short PowerPoint, which kind of hopefully brings into focus some of the um, trends and patterns that I saw within this data. So the BMC data for trad climbing incidents has 146 that are reported. Of those, one is a fatality. There's 18 serious accidents, and I often categorized them based on a very loose thing of like a serious injury for me was a broken femur, a broken back, chest injuries. So not if you broke a rib, not too bad, but if you potentially had many broken ribs and a punctured lung and head injuries. I then there were 34 minor injuries, which I looked at limb breaks and hospitalizations. Um, I often changed people from like minor injuries into near misses if they walked away with cuts and bruises. There's a lot of people that have had some absolutely miraculous escapes. And I also put people in if they went to hospital suspecting a break and it was actually not a break and it's just a soft tissue injury. So, there wasn't that much medical treatment. Um, and I think one of the things that when you look at these, you really have to be careful of, these are what people self-report, and some people what some people see as serious, what some people see as minor. So, um, yeah, it's definitely worth considering when you're looking at these. What reading the devil is in the detail, basically. Um, if somebody hobbles away from the crag, it's yeah, you're like okay. Um, So my analysis was quite basic. Like I said, there was no real statistical stuff done. Um, the one line summary. Uh, when I did look at this, so if we go back, this one fatality, sort of 18 serious, 34 minor, 94 near misses, is looking good in that we should have more near misses than minor injuries, and more minor injuries than serious injuries, and more serious injuries than fatalities. Um, what I would suggest is these are quite skewed in that um, people are more likely to go onto a site like this if it's a serious incident, and therefore I think thousands of near misses probably go unreported. Uh, uh, an example I can give is I've had a lot of near misses and stuff like that, but I've never once used the BMC incident reporting um, thing. And if you go back to where I said learn from my mistakes, there's a few of them there. The other thing I kind of looked at when I was looking at the data, I think it would be interesting to compare multi-pitch versus single pitch, and even subdivide single pitch down to short, i.e. less than 50 foot, so sort of grit edge kind of stuff, versus longer single pitches. And we go into that a little bit more detail, but essentially people that multi-pitch climb are often more experienced than single pitch. So single pitch has a lot of more novices, but there definitely seemed to be a trend for more of these things to happen on much shorter kind of grist crags, and I will cover that in a bit. And then I wondered whether it would be worth looking at whether they're trends based in the year. So we've got 2017, 2018, 2019, all the way through to 2025 now, and whether there are trends in within that. But again, these are things that I didn't look into because I'm just doing this as a little bit of an aside, really, and to see what we can learn. Um, so one of the things I looked at is single pitch crag seem to be more prevalent um, when you read through. Again, I suggest there's more novices at single pitch crags. I also, from a teaching climbing perspective, I generally teach climbing in Wales where we have big multi-pitch routes. I very rarely taught on gritstone, but when I have, I found it quite terrifying because the ground is very close by, and often when you're climbing, you place a bit of gear, you go up, and if you fell off trying to place that piece of gear, you're probably going to hit the ground up until, like, 2/3 height of the crag. There's never more than like one piece of gear between you and the ground, whereas on much longer routes you could have like 2 or 3 pieces between you and the ground. There's also, I wondered whether there was an issue with when you have a short crag. If you stand away from the base, the rope comes in at an angle. So if somebody weights it, potentially the vector angle is kind of between here and here. The angle is this way. So wires can get pulled up and out. And so you can have this issue of routes being stripped in a fall from the first runner upwards. And then the person's only on one runner. There's also quite a lot of gear failures in this. And I'm kind of going to go back to, there was a mountain training safety report about something that happened on one of their courses. And there was a much bigger report, much more in-depth report into that. And one of the conclusions was that they need to look at people's experience who are coming onto like mountain training courses, and actually if they're just climbing single pitch, they potentially have never weighted a placement, because in multi-pitch climbing you might get a hanging stance, you're probably going to have to abseil off or abseil in, and so people that just go single climbing to like a gritstone edge, they could climb up, make a belay, bring that person up. And even if they're weighted, they're sat on the ground, so they don't necessarily put full weight on the belay. So yeah, that was one of a few of the reasons that I think that maybe single pitch crags are more prevalent just there. There was a surprising number of trad falls, often from, like I say, single pitch that resulted in ground falls. There were things where gear pops when it was fallen on, or it was rested on and then failed. There are all sorts of issues of gear not being extended well enough, and that going. There was a few people who they fell because they went off route. Again, this is one of the underlying reasons why people fall. So, people fall off and the gear pops, that's bad placement. But the reason that they fall off is they're going off route. The other one is a thing where people are choosing the wrong routes. And even in quite a lot of the reports, the people go, yeah, we came to the crag, this was the only route that was dry, or we came to the route, we had other plans, but people are on that route, so we got on this one, and they kind of got on the wrong route or a few people were like, oh, I hadn't climbed since last summer, so I came out and I probably got on a route that was too hard for me to get back into it. So there's a lot based on like route choices, and again, separate again, but again, this comes down to route. Your choice to get on a route is, there was damp, rock was actually damp, it was raining, or the conditions were poor, it was a little bit greasy. Again, I feel that, as an instructor, I have to go and climb in the rain, but it's the worst message that we often send to people is that, climbing in the rain is appropriate. Uh, it's just not. Go to an indoor wall, you'll have more fun. And the other major sort of trend in these falls, and whether it ended in accident or not, was there was a lot of loose rock or hold failures where people climbing up and a hold has come off. Sometimes they would have done the route before and they weren't expecting it. Sometimes it was, there was a couple where it was new routes and you're like, well, yeah, you're going to get a lot of loose rock on new routes because nobody's climbed it before. So yeah, those are reasons. So you've got basically people need to place gear better. People need to read routes and make better choices, which I think is an interesting one because if people had made better choices, then they wouldn't have put themselves into that situation. I always think that if you're doing a route like downhill mountain biking or kayaking, you could be going so quickly that a incident rushes up to you and there's not much you can do about it. But in climbing, nothing happens that quickly, and often you are the person that have put yourself into the position that you find yourself. And I've definitely seen people that go up and they're trying to follow a route and they get to a move that they can't do and they go left or right at the lights, is what I describe it as. That rather than actually face the move that they can't do, they think, oh, it must be easier this way or that way. It's like, actually, you're on the easiest route on the crag. If you go anywhere else, chances are it's going to be harder. The other trend I thought, so as well as like people falling and gear failing or hitting the ground for various reasons, there was an awful lot of abseiling accidents. Again, possibly because people are weighting the system, but there was also a lot of issues with retrievable abseils. This included ends being unequal, so they abseil off the end of one rope or nearly do. Some are, near misses, cuts and bruises. Some are hilarious, like somebody went down into a sea cliff and they ended up taking a swim because they abseiled off the end of one of the ropes. And some are utterly horrendous. But again, it's unequal ends, having long tails, so they've joined two ropes together and they've kept the tails really long, and that has resulted into people clipping into the tail end of the rope rather than the bits that they should be abseiling on. You then get people that incorrectly attach to the abseil. A lot of these are near misses in that if you set up an abseil and you set it up with a sling as a cow's tail and extended, there's this thing where nearly everybody who had this had done it this way, and as they went to lean on it, they weight test everything, they realized they'd done something wrong and went back. There was a case where somebody had rigged an abseil down a sea cliff and it was like right on the edge, so there was nowhere to test the where you could pre-weight stuff, and this guy basically went down and the only thing he had attached was a prusik, and he went, I think he actually walked away from that one, I can't remember. But yeah, so allowing your setups to have that area where you can safely weight something while still on a cow's tail that isn't taking the weight is the big thing in terms of like, if you can't buddy check, you need to self check. The other one was the setting up. So people that climb up something and they've then got to abseil down, you're tied into the rope, and actually what you need to do is get yourself from being in the rope system, often tied into a belay with a rope, to being on that cow's tail attached to a belay to then rig it. And there's often quite a few issues where people have lark's footed the sling to the rope loop and then untied the rope loop. There's been times when there's just a lot going on in the belay and they've tied into the wrong thing. They aren't all retrievable abseil accidents. Some are just like normal abseil. There was one from a group which was just a distraction really. So guy was teaching abseiling, and two of his group, by all accounts, kicked off, and there was a violent struggle. And so he'd gone down to sort that out. He's obviously very flustered, gone back to the top just to put two more people down the abseil, and he's forgotten to clip his own safety cow's tail into the belay. And so when he's gone to abseil them down, the only thing that was really holding him on was the rope that he was the control rope. He quickly made it out, but it's an important thing that distraction is another issue. So again, this wasn't, I don't think, as big as the abseil or the trad falls in terms of stuff like that. There were a few issues where it was a communication issue, where people have said take, or have heard take rather than safe, and it's led to people being off belay when they shouldn't have been, and vice versa. Somebody said low rope and they ran out of rope, and rather than shout out, you're out of rope and we're now moving together, it was just discovered they were moving together. There's a lot of issues, I think, more issues when you're at like a roadside crag or at sea cliffs. Sea cliffs, you often have like the sound of the sea that can take over. I've definitely been on sea cliffs where trying to communicate between me and the other person has been an issue. And yeah, when I look at this, I wonder whether it's time I buy some little radios. Another kind of breakdown in communication, in that people didn't really, think the whole thing through. Somebody led a trad climb that went to what was essentially a sport climbing lower off, and they just needed to thread, clip back in, and be lowered off like you would a sport route. But when they got to the top, they've gone safe, and the belayer has thought, oh, it's a trad route, they're going to belay me from the top, and has taken them off belay. So that was, I think there was a couple of instances of that. The other thing with these, which I think can help, is if you can't hear somebody, you could try, and even like I talked about with the non-verbal communication in just with lowering somebody, but if you are in a situation where you can't hear whether the leader's said safe, what you can do is I can pay out rope quite quickly, and so what I might do is pay out, just a meter of slack, and if that goes in, if it goes in like 6 inches and stops, 6 inches and stop, 6 inches to a foot and stop, 6 inches to a foot and stop. That to me is somebody's got me on belay, because they're taking in, locking off, hand swap. They're taking in. So the other way is the rope will just go in reasonably quickly in a slow and steady pace. And you'll be like trying to pay rope out, and that will be indicative that somebody is pulling in the slack rope. And then I will always shout, that's me. And if I be like climbing, and then I'll undo like one piece from my belay and put a little bit of slack out, and maybe just clip into a belay with a spare quick draw or with the sling, and wait for the rope to go out. And again, I'm looking for the rope just to go 6 inches, stop, 6 inches, stop. And so yeah, I don't think there were any actual real nasty accidents, but there was a lot of near misses due to communication errors. So yeah, that was just one. And the other thing is, there's a lot more to this. So if we went through just lowering somebody, it's not just like, okay, that, I'm at the top, take. So, you take the rope in, you row it, they say that's me. And then you go lowering and you lower them. There's a lot more to it. So when somebody gets to the top and says take, I will take in, and if I can see them, I'll like, step back and try and put the tension on, and I'll be like, yeah, okay, I've got you. And if they say, that's, ready to lower, I'm like, I should be expecting to feel a little bit more weight, as they've, if somebody says take, they usually haven't let go yet. So I should feel a little bit more tension on the rope as they sit back. And then when I lower, I should be able to feel that I'm not just lowering the rope, the weight off me. Weight should stay on me, and I lower down. And if I can look up to make sure they're coming down at the same speed. And so, even in something as simple as just like lowering somebody at a climbing wall, there's a lot more than verbal communication. There's also visual and this sense of you feeling the weight. And yeah, that is just a few of the trends. So yeah, communication errors, abseiling errors. I will probably go into. I'll try and find somewhere where we can go into sort of like all of these issues in abseiling at some point. It's hard to go through all of these, but yeah, we'll look through them in greater detail. And yeah, single pitch seems to be where people make the most mistakes, maybe because of all novices, maybe because the ground is so much closer. So when, if you fall off and you don't hit anything, the rope stretches, and that's how the whole system's designed. The big issue really comes when you hit something solid like a ledge or the floor. And then there's this other issue of how rope kind of, when ropes are weighted, what happens to them. And I've got some ideas, because I did something like this with a guy that used to run the outdoor stuff at Bangor, and we just did it in a gym with slings on a jungle gym, and it was just like really help people visualize what's going on. I can't remember his name, and I'm really sorry that I can't remember your name. Great guy. He's down on the Clean a lot doing loads of stuff like that. But yeah, that's just a very short one on just, me looking through 146 different accident reports and looking for some trends and stuff that might help you guys not become one of those statistics. So thanks again. I will say goodbye